To my series on the 10 tips that I have on my bookmark here for grief and loss. 10 tips when grieving. And today is about this one right here, develop a support system. Very important. So I'm going to go over today about why we should develop a support system, the reason why it's important to, some of the reasons, and some of the benefits of having a support system. And then I most likely am going to do another one on support again, and that will be more of the how-tos, develop a support system. Not that I have it all perfectly figured out, but some tips on how to. And that's going to kind of cover some of the types of people you are looking and that will work to help you with, and which ones will not. So it will cover some of that. Too much for one video. So, all right. So Dr. Alan Wolfelt and the book Understanding Your Grief. He is a world-renowned expert. And so I want to quote two of his quotes that I think are really important. And the first one is, he says, the most self-compassionate thing that you can do for yourself is to reach out for help from others. He says that's the most self-compassionate thing you can do, is to reach out to others for help in your grief and loss and your pain. So he also mentions that grief and mourning is probably one of the hardest things you'll ever have to go through. So that's a big statement right there too. But that, when other people help you, it makes that work less burdensome. Just like in physical work, if you have to go paint a house, but you have others to help you paint that house, it's going to make it a lot easier, right? Or cleaning a whole house, or whatever you would think of. It definitely, And then I thought of the statement, many hands make light work. So kind of like saying a large task with multiple people helping is not such a hard task. So we always think of that in physical work, right? But it's just as important with the mental work and the emotional work and the heart work and all that, right? It's just as important. So the principle stands. So that's one of the reasons why. And the reason why is because God didn't make us to be an island. God didn't make us to be alone. I like my alone time, but we were made to be in community. We were made to be in relationships with one another. It's definitely a core part of us as well as the animals, but we're different than the animals, right? So that's part of it, is because God didn't make us. He didn't make us to do that. If you look at most of the cultures around the world, they very much grieve and mourn together as a community. God, the Jewish people, which is what Jesus is from, did that too. So another thing that I noticed about Alan Wolfelt is that he has 6 needs of mourning. It's one of the things he has come up with to help, is that there's 6 top needs for grieving and mourning, which mourning is the bringing it out, your grief out. And so one of his 6, this number 6 one, is getting help, receiving help from other people. So that's how important he thinks of it as, is it's one of his top 6 needs for people who are mourning. Okay. And just think of the fact of the grief is within you, but as soon as you begin to express it out through words or actions or a way to honor your loved one or anything like that, that's when it becomes mourning. And I think of Jesus' words in Matthew that says, blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Now notice that mourning is expressing it out. Well, typically that's not, you can talk to yourself and that's not all bad, but typically that's talking to somebody else, right? Somebody else or a group of people. So I am very honored to get to tell my daughter's story, because I'm bringing awareness about the dangers of fentanyl, but it's also me honoring her life to get to tell the sad part of her story. And then sometimes I get to talk more about, just who she is. So that involves people right there. The whole definition of mourning involves other people. And a couple other reasons why is that it's easier to realize certain things, like I'm not alone. It helps you realize, or anybody realize, in their own grief, they're not alone. And we can all get so caught up in our own pain and overwhelmed and depressed and sad. And we just go and become a recluse, and we withdraw and go into isolation, and that is not healthy. Some alone time is good, but it's not healthy to isolate. So it's easier to realize when you're with other people that you're not alone, right? That makes sense, right? It also helps you know that you're not the only one going through what you're going through. Again, we're all unique, yes. None of us exactly experiences what each other has gone through, but we can relate because we all share similar pains and similar emotions. And sometimes we don't think that's true, but it really is true. So when we get together with other people mourning, whether it's a support group or even one-on-one, and somebody shares, we can like, oh, I relate to that. I get that. And it can also help us feel more normal when sometimes maybe we feel like we're crazy or we're lazy or we're, going too slow or, all these things that we wonder about. When we realize that this is normal, and again, we're not in a race, and don't compare, which was my last week's video, then we can go, I'm more normal. I'm acceptable. It's okay. I don't like what I'm feeling. I don't enjoy what I'm feeling, but it's okay. And we don't have to beat ourselves up or question it or add on to our grief with that kind of, thinking and so forth. So it can be very validating. We can learn wisdom. We can learn more coping skills when we're with other people and, listening to other people. All of us are so much into watching videos, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if that's all you're doing, not enough. You can learn from other people by that, but you need to be in community as well. And you're also less likely to fall into a pit or fall into despair, get stuck, in where you're at in a certain stage. Sometimes we just do get stuck for a little while. It's not the end of the world, but we don't want to stay stuck. But you're not as likely to do that or fall into depression when you're in community, and you have supportive people who care about you, and you've allowed that and put that around you and invited that. So we'll talk more about how that looks on the next video. So those are just some of them. If you think of more, please tell me. And it's important to know that help comes in many different forms and from many different types of people. It comes in many different forms and many different types of people. So that is, and just to go over some of those, not that you haven't thought of it, but it's good to hear this. I'll just give you a list of the ones that I wrote down and thought of, the different types of people or relationships we're in: friends, family, pastor, church members, other grievers, other maybe even coworkers, and then more one-on-one, getting more one-on-one help, if you want to call it that, would be with your grief, would be maybe with either a counselor or a therapist or even a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but more likely, or a coach, which is what I am. So mentor could be a friend, any of those, whatever you have or want to aspire for, that somebody who's, educated about grief and even preferably have been through a life-changing grief so that they can relate to you. That's important, right? Especially if you're paying or getting one-on-one help and that kind of thing. So those are some of the different types of peoples and relationships when Wolfelt says help comes in many different forms and different types of people. There's some of the ones, right? So now I want to just cover some of the benefits of having a support system. Some, because I'm sure there's many. And so I'm not necessarily being exhaustive with my list. But having somebody to walk alongside you, Wolfelt calls it companion you, to walk alongside you. Oh my goodness, it's so comforting. It's so supportive and reassuring. And it just gives you more strength. That gives you strength. Another thing it gives you is stability. And another thing is more ability to keep going, to persevere, or to giving you staying power, if you want to call it that. That's some of the things that it does for you to have a support system. Another thing Wolfelt says, I like his wording, is it helps you with divine momentum. So I would call perseverance and that ability to keep moving forward and not get stuck and not quit and not just stop. But a grief journey is moving forward, right? It's movement. not at a certain speed, but it is movement and it's going somewhere. And that's the key, is we want to keep moving. So having a support system can help us to keep moving and have divine momentum. Okay, and a few other things is, it's so helpful to have somebody listen, be a good listener, an objective listener, a compassionate listener, non-judgmental person, of course, is what we need, that will really listen and accept where we're at and what we're going through and won't try to shut us down or tell us how to do it. And that is so, so important. And that helps us process our grief, acknowledge it, more likely get ideas on how to help us to go through it, and so forth. So those are some of the things. It definitely helps our pain to be more bearable, to have a support system. It's kind of like, and the Bible verse I want to mention just briefly is Galatians 6:2, and that says to bear each other's burdens. And here I mentioned Galatians 6:4 last week about carrying our own load, and that passage kind of seems contradictory, and I'm not sure why Paul put it together like that. But the verse that is verse 2, it says, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. That word for carry is to take up, burdens, weights, things that are heavy, things that make life harder to move. If we have weights on us, just hanging on us, it's going to make it harder to move and weigh us down and make us more tired, right? But when we bear each other's burden and be supportive, I believe that's what that is, then it makes it lighter and easier and maybe even take some of the loads off of each other, right? So that was the verse that I came up with for that. But that's making the pain more bearable, I think applies to that verse right there. And one more thing that Alan Wolfelt said specifically is it helps to strengthen the bonds of love that make life seem worth living. I thought that was beautiful. So having a support system in place strengthens the bonds of love that make life seem worth living. It can help us find our purpose. If people that don't already totally know that they have a purpose, and it doesn't mean they're not functioning in that, but one older woman that I coached just was so transformed. She was in a pit, and the Lord used me and our support group and others to just, in her own efforts, to get her out of the pit. And she did it pretty quickly, and she was in a very, very deep pit. But just seeing her, I don't know what my gifts are or what I'm good at, and just me being able to pull that out of her. I mean, she's active in hospital visitation and other things. So by all means, she has gifts, but she didn't totally know that. So a lot of times you can help people with all this, and they may find their purpose better than they knew before they even went through all the pain and the suffering of the loss. So those are some of the reasons why to have a support system and the benefits of the support system, having a support system. And there's more. But those are some of the ones I want to mention today. And next week, the next video in this series will be kind of a part 2 of this and give more how to develop a support system. Sometimes it's obvious to some of us, but other times it's not. So I'm just going to talk through that. So join me on the next one. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel and you are getting benefit from the content and the things I'm sharing, please subscribe and hit the bell so that you can see the uploads as they come in. I think I'm going to return back to Saturdays. I tried Wednesdays for a couple weeks. Let me know. When do you watch my video? Do you think there's a certain day or time that would be good for me to publish it and put it out there? Or is there a certain day that you like to watch it? I would be very obliged to have your input on that. Okay, God bless. Julie K, helping you find your way through grief and loss. Bye-bye.